Welcome back. As the war with Iran rages on and continues to create volatility in the market, the president is set to address House Republicans any minute now at their annual legislative retreat in Doral, Florida. At this retreat, Republican House members are supposed to be laying out their legislative agenda before the midterms. But President Trump seems to have only one thing on his mind, and that's passing the Save America Act. It's a bill that would overhaul voting laws, and the president is giving lawmakers an ultimatum. Posting on Truth Social, quote, "It must be done immediately," and adding, "I, as president, will not sign any other bills until this is passed," and not the watered-down version. According to President Trump, that would include showing voter ID and proof of citizenship to vote, no mail-in ballots except for certain exceptions, no men and women's sports, and, quote, "no transgender mutilation surgery for children." We should be clear, that is not what is actually in the bill right now. Joining me now to break it all down on set is NBC News senior national political reporter Sahil Kapur. Sahil, I want to start with this question about what is in the bill, what is not in the bill, because he is asking for things that they tried to include in the bill but couldn't in the House version. So just how realistic is it that they're going to be able to add on these provisions for a bill that's already struggling to get the support to pass?
Yeah, Mel, so the answer is maybe some of the new demands that President Trump is making could be added. But as you've noted, there's a lot in this bill that has been negotiated and has been sliced and diced by House leadership to figure out what can pass. So let's take a look at some of the provisions that are already in there. Mandatory ID to cast a ballot, already in. Proof of citizenship to register to vote, already in. What's not in the bill? Proof of citizenship to cast a vote. Again, this is something that Trump demanded earlier. It is not in the bill. No mail-in voting. As you have reported, this is something that House Republican leaders considered. There's not the support to ban it entirely, yet the president has continued to cast the bill, the version that already passed, as if this is in it. Now the new stuff. Banning trans athletes from women's sports. No gender reassignment surgeries for minors. These are things that Republicans do support. I can easily see it getting the vote. The problem is if they do include that, then they kind of lose the argument that this is fundamentally an elections bill. This can't be a Christmas tree where the president adds new ornaments that he wants, lest it undercut the message. Now, lastly, I spoke moments ago to Senate Majority Leader John Thune and asked him, given all the troubles that the Senate is having in terms of finding a path to the bill, should the House pass a third version of it if President Trump wants new demands? He said probably yes. If the bill has to change, then the House should pass it, given how cumbersome it will be for the Senate to pass it a second time, let alone a first.
Maybe he's passing the buck a little bit to his House counterparts. I want to talk about this ultimatum that President issued about not signing any other bills. That would also apply to Republican priorities and Republican bills. They're trying to do a housing bill to bring down affordability. So how do you see all of that playing out?
I take that with a heavy grain of salt. I think this is one of those cases where you take the president seriously, not literally. Literally meaning, the White House has already backed off this suggestion by saying DHS funding doesn't apply here. If Congress were to pass a DHS funding bill, of course the president would sign it. That's according to our colleague, John Allen. And look, this is a Republican-led Congress. They're not in the business of passing a whole bunch of bills that Trump doesn't want. Is he really going to refuse to sign a bill that he does support that they pass? The other technical loophole here is that if he doesn't sign a bill for 10 days, it becomes law anyway. So there are a lot of ways to interpret this. The part that's serious is that he's trying to convey to the Republican Congress that he's mad and that he wants action on the SAVE Act because he's not seeing enough of it.
We'll definitely be listening to what he says to House Republicans as they're gathered in a room today. I do want to put this in the context of the DHS funding fight because some airports have seen hour-long delays as spring break gets underway. The administration is blaming the shutdown as TSA workers are set to miss their first paycheck this week, their first full paycheck. So doesn't that undercut his threat? And where do these negotiations on a DHS funding bill actually stand?
It's not looking good right now. We're coming up on a month at the end of this week from the time DHS funding lapsed, and now the consequences are getting real. They kind of had it easy in the first few weeks because, the paychecks had already been kind of out there. There was a partial paycheck, and now they're going to miss a first full paycheck. Now we're seeing the consequences with these TSA lines. Look at that on the screen. That is extraordinary. If that continues, that's going to put a lot of pressure on lawmakers that hasn't existed. But again, with Thune, as I just mentioned, take a look at what he said about this. Quote, "We've made overtures to them being Democrats, and as of today, the Democrats are unwilling to even participate in a conversation about how to try and fund DHS, so it's just a complete block on having any path forward," end quote. That is John Thune. Of course, Democrats have their own version of this. They say they're asking for very reasonable things, such as having federal ICE and CBP agents abide by the same standards of conduct as local police departments do, and have not gotten reciprocation from Republicans. So we will see.
And it was the TSA wait times and chaos at the airports that did break the camel's back with the last shutdown. So we'll have to wait and see. Sahil, thank you so much for joining us.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.